As we traveled throughout School District 21, providing professional development on PowerGrade and related assessment, weighting assignments proved to be one of the most talked about and focused on areas of the professional development activities. We've recommended that people weight assignments based on points on each individual assignment. Adding those points up over the course of the trimester, the assignments that have more points are worth more and are weighted more heavily, and the assignments that have less points are worth less. And while we found that many people were doing this already, and many more were able to understand it and begin using it, we did have two other categories of teachers. So first, let's talk about those. One category of teachers was teachers for whom every assignment was worth 100 points, or 100%. In this example, the first assignment might be a 10-question fill-in-the-blank quiz or worksheet or a little 10-question spelling test. It would be worth 100 points, or 100%. The next assignment we look at is the Frere Model Graphic Organizer, a reading graphic organizer that requires students to interact with the text and to interact with their reading both at a comprehension level and at an evaluation level, in which students are going to be comparing and contrasting and evaluating the vocabulary word in this case based on other things they've read and their prior knowledge. This would also be worth 100 points, or 100%. And then the last example here is a big project that's got 2 learner quality grades, a writing grade and a speaking grade, and a social science grade. And this big project represents more than half of the trimester's coverage of social science content, and it would be worth 100 points, or 100%, within this scheme of every assignment being 100 points, or 100%. For these teachers and students, one of the benefits of this is that it's very clear to students how well they've done. They come to understand what's good, a 95, and what's not so good, a 71. Additionally, adding up grades for the teacher is very simple. You know your total points possible. It's going to be divisible by 100. And then you simply have to add up how many points each student earned, do the problem, you're done. Very clear. We also found teachers who weighted by categories. While there are many more teachers apparently at the high school level that weight by categories, those teachers that weight by categories in School District 21 subscribe to the same ideas. Weighting by category might look like this. Come in on the first day of class, and you're told that homework will constitute 10% of your grade, participation 15%, quizzes 20%, tests 25%, and your projects 30% of your total grade. This has some advantages. It's a good organizing structure for the teacher, but it's also got a number of significant disadvantages. First, it's based on the assumption that in the case of this example, all quizzes or projects or tests are equal in weight within that category. That pulls in part of an entirely different system, which is 100 points each. Or, if you don't make that assumption, then you're assigning different point totals to every quiz, and now all of a sudden, you've got to do 2 multiplication problems in order to answer the simple question, which is at the crux of the problems with this system. Well, Mr. or Ms. So-and-so teacher, within the scheme of the whole trimester, how much is this assignment or assessment worth? Becomes a very difficult question to answer because these percentages have introduced a multiplier and made things very unclear oftentimes for students and for parents. And frankly, in some cases, even for teachers themselves, because now we're spending a lot of time in the circle of grading instead of in the cycle of assessment and instruction. So then we get to weighting by points, where each assignment is worth however many points that assignment is worth. How do we determine that? Sometimes it's determined based on what makes sense for that assignment, like a math test and how many steps students undergo with each problem and how important each problem is in the scheme of the unit. And sometimes it's even more subjective than that, like with a rubric, where we determine that this assignment overall is worth 40 points for science. Because 40 points is a medium number of points, and this is a medium important assignment. It covered a fair amount of content that's fairly important, but it wasn't one of our huge assignments, and it wasn't a real small little couple-day class activity that we're scoring to see where students are at with it. When we weight by points, we look at that first example, that little spelling test or fill-in-the-blank assignment. It would be worth 10 points. 10 questions, 10 points. Now, that doesn't mean that some teacher can't give it 20 points and make each problem worth 2 points. They can, and it's fine if they do. Looking at the next assignment, you can see I've got 2-point totals on here, because in my classroom, I have students reading 2 different texts, and when I created my master copy of this, thinking about what students might put down, because this is open-ended and they may put down very different things that I haven't thought of. The one text, I believe, lended itself to students being able to provide more characteristics and non-examples than the other text. And so for the students in the one group, it became a 23-point assignment, and for the students in the other group, it became a 19-point assignment. In both cases, it's similarly weighted, and when I move to PowerTeacher Web Gradebook to enter this, I will enter each assignment as a separate assignment, and only the students who are reading that text will have a score entered for that assignment. And lastly, we get to that big project. Whoa, there's lots of numbers, but it's really not so difficult to understand. The first 2 rows in my rubric are learner quality rows, and learner qualities are going to be our exception. We're going to recommend that all learner qualities are assigned a 4-3-2-1, and that learner qualities are the one place you actually use the weighting features. Then we move into our language arts writing grade, our language arts speaking grade, and our social science grade. And for each of those on the rubric, I do need to subjectively make an informed decision about just how many points I think that assignment's worth. So for example, for the writing grade, this was a fairly medium writing assignment. We did go through the writing process, but it's not one of our main places that we're teaching writing. We only focused on one specific writing skill that we knew from previous writing assessments each student was struggling with. And so we made this assignment worth 40 points. And then from there determined that any student that got a 4 on the rubric would get 38 points out of 40. Any student that got a 3 on the rubric would get 34 points out of 40. Any student that got a 2 on the rubric would get 29 points out of 40, and any student that got a 1 on the rubric would get 25 points out of 40. Now with social science, on the other hand, at the bottom, this unit on immigration covered more than half of our content for this trimester. And we know this is a big assignment. For us, a big assignment's 80 points. And so we made this worth 80 points. Could have made it worth 100. 60 wouldn't have been enough. And why did we determine that? Because we know from other assignments that we've given just how many points was a lot. That is subjective, it's a team decision, and it's something that'll take some practice for teachers who are new to weighting by points. But now it's very cut and dry. We know what's weighted more heavily by what gets more points possible. Some of the advantages of weighting by points are, number one, that it's simple. You can see what they get out of what they get, just like with the 100-point system. But they also know inherently, built in, without the teacher having to do anything else, particularly any multiplication, how important an assignment is in the scheme of the trimester. This simplicity leads to transparency for students and parents. They understand their grades and where they're coming from, and hopefully that helps them understand their performance, or at least start asking teachers questions about their performance, and the teachers can then respond to those questions in such a way that lead to increased learning. Another nice feature about weighting by points is built into the PowerTeacher Web Gradebook. This is particularly advantageous for teachers and teams who are new to weighting by points. The PowerTeacher Web Gradebook allows you to come back and, let's say we made that social science grade worth 80 points, and then a few weeks later we give a test, social science test that's not nearly as important, but just because of how we add up the points on the test ends up being worth 57 possible points. That's 3/4 as many points as this big assignment, and it's really only about half as important as this big project that we had just finished. So we decided to go back into the Web Gradebook, back to that assignment we've already entered, to our immigration project, and we change our total possible points from 80 to 110, because we're still getting used to this. In PowerGrade, I would now have to go through and recalculate each student's individual grade to match that 110 points possible. In PowerTeacher Web Gradebook, the computer does that for us. So experiment, change away as you get used to this. If you do this regularly throughout first trimester, we're sure that by Thanksgiving, you'll be set and ready to go. Weighting by points gives you the ability to sort and view by category, because you haven't lost that ability in the PowerTeacher Web Gradebook. Categories can exist separate from points. So you still can have all those benefits of categories while being able to have the simplicity and transparency of weighting by points. Finally, weighting by points allows you to, like in either of the other examples, bring your data into a spreadsheet through the reports export, but it allows you to also bring in how important each assignment is individually just by how many points it's worth, without having to do any extra work. We do recommend weighting assignments by points. If you don't weight assignments by points, you do need to be prepared to explain to students, parents, and colleagues how your assignments are weighted and what the rationale is. And you need to be able to do it in a way that you are sure that it's very, very clear to them. Please consider weighting your assignments by points. While we know that for some people it's a change of direction from what you've done historically, based on Pearson's experience working with well over 1,000 teachers across the country on the development of the Web Gradebook and on assessment in accordance with that, and based on our own experiences in implementing PowerGrade and looking at related assessment issues, we believe that weighting by points allows us to best focus on assessment and instruction and not on the grading process.